Today's story takes place in the near future. In the year 2153, a space probe launched from Earth lands on the distant planet Tanis. It detects signs of life there. It turns out this planet is very suitable for human habitation. Meanwhile, Earth's population has reached an astonishing 20 billion. The scarcity of food and water has led to an energy crisis. This has plunged Earth into years of conflict. Colonizing another planet has become urgent. In the year 2174, a massive spaceship named Elysium is launched into space. On board are 60,000 carefully selected volunteers. Along with samples from Earth's biosphere collected over many years, they are heading to colonize the planet Tanis. This journey will take 123 years. Along the way, the ship will keep only a crew of 3 pilots. They will rotate every 2 years, the rest will enter cryogenic sleep. However, long-term sleep can have serious side effects, such as mental breakdowns, memory confusion, personality disorders, delusions, and so on, collectively known as insomnia-related disorders. Will they be able to reach their new home safely? Hello everyone, today, we're talking about a classic sci-fi thriller, Deep Space Amnesia. This man has just awakened from cryogenic sleep. According to standard procedure, there should be personnel coming to wake him up in the system. But strangely, there's not a single person here. It's pitch black outside the cabin. There's a short circuit, the control panel is covered in dust. There's no one in the adjacent sleep pod. Another lieutenant named Peyton hasn't woken up yet, having just awakened from long-term sleep. This man's memory is also in disarray. He can't remember anything. It's only after he assesses his surroundings that he remembers his name is Paul. He is the duty officer of Flight Crew 5. He tragically discovers that the duty pod's door is tightly shut. There are signs of forced entry, but it won't budge. He can't wake the lieutenant either. He feels like a mouse trapped in a jar. If this goes on, he'll starve. Given this situation, he suspects something must have gone terribly wrong at the ship. So, what exactly happened? Just as he begins to accept reality, his heart heavy with despair, a sudden loud rumble shakes the area. The ship's main system unexpectedly awakens Lieutenant Peyton. The lieutenant also suffers from the aftereffects of insomnia. He knows nothing, only limited fragments of memory. The two communicated simply. After piecing together the memory fragments, they finally understood their awkward situation. They took turns based on their numbers. Each team had been on duty for 2 years. They had already been in the sleep pod for 8 years. Fortunately, the crew was familiar with the ship's operating system. They activated the backup power for the duty pod. The two quickly tried to contact the outside world by phone, but strangely, there was no response. Then, there was a violent shaking. Paul blurted out, "It must be a problem with the ship's nuclear reactor." As some memories returned, he realized he was actually a technical engineer. Right now, the most important thing was to escape this enclosed space. They needed to open the duty pod's door, so the lieutenant instructed him to enter the ventilation duct to find an exit. The space in the ventilation duct was very narrow. As he went down a slope, Paul suddenly fell headfirst. He landed right next to a corpse. This dead person was actually the teammate who had come out of the empty sleep pod. It seemed he was very unfortunate. He must have been tangled in the cables in the duct and starved to death. Paul immediately used all his strength. He opened the ventilation duct. He fell into the shoe cabinet room and narrowly escaped. But unfortunately, the radio was broken and he lost contact with the sender. Without the sender's remote guidance, he could only fumble around like a headless fly, groping in the dark. Suddenly, a figure of a girl flashed by in the corridor. He immediately wanted to chase after her to ask what was going on, but instead, he stumbled upon a hanging corpse. The corpse was tangled with pulleys and wires. It looked like a trap. Suddenly, the girl appeared again. She knocked Paul down with a punch. She held a knife to him, demanding he hand over everything in his pockets. She was incredibly fierce, but right after that, a beast-like roar echoed from nearby. The girl instantly vanished without a trace. Paul was left with a head full of questions. He then saw a white figure above him. It dragged the corpse away and began to devour it. No matter where this white monster came from, even a fool could tell it was extremely dangerous. Paul turned and ran. In a panic, he hid in the shoe cabinet. Only then did he finally see what the monster looked like. It's a humanoid monster that's completely white. Its face is like a terrifying mosaic. It moves with incredible speed. Although it can't speak, it can use melee weapons and set traps. Just then, the wireless gaming suddenly returned to normal. A call from the sender echoed in the headphones. The monster heard the sound and went wild, destroying the blood cabinet. Our protagonist was somewhat lucky. The monster dragged away that teammate's body. It spared his life by chance. A shaken Paul quickly reported the situation to the sender. At this point, both of their memories started to return. They finally remembered. This was a one-way space colonization mission. There are 60,000 passengers in deep sleep on the ship. The destination is planet Tanis. They must regain control of the ship quickly to eliminate the monster. But the reactor is malfunctioning. All systems are damaged. They need to restart the reactor first. So, under the guidance of the sender, Paul decided to take his riot gear. He ventured to manually restart the reactor. However, he hadn't gone far when he encountered another person hanging. It was clearly a trap set by the monster. Paul quickly whispered to rescue him. The man was extremely terrified. It turned out he was the duty officer from Team 6. His name was Bud. He was supposed to wake up after Team 5's shift. But there was a system error. He had been awakened early. He hurriedly smeared all over himself to mask his scent. Then he told Paul that riot weapon in his hand was useless against the monsters. Just run as far as you can when you see a monster. Before he could finish this ominous warning, a group of monsters came rushing around the corner. The two immediately ran away, but the monsters were too fast. It didn't last 2 minutes before he became a meal. Seeing this, Paul could only run for his life. But unfortunately, he fell into a monster's trap. Just when he was in despair, an Asian guy suddenly appeared. He cut the ropes and saved Paul's life. It seems the writer thought he couldn't survive alone. so they assigned him a bodyguard. This Asian guy was a member of the agriculture team. Upon hearing the protagonist mention going to repair the reactor, he naturally decided to go along. Meanwhile, on their way, they encountered that beautiful girl again. The two sides got into another fight. No fight, no acquaintance, unity is strength. Bauer explained to the girl, only by restarting the reactor can they control the spaceship. They need to wake up the others to eliminate the monsters. Only then can everyone survive. After hearing this, the girl thought Bauer's idea was indeed the best solution to the spaceship's predicament. So she decided to go with him. The three of them arrived at the girl's place. It was then that they learned it from her that this spaceship was like Earth's Noah's Ark. She was a member responsible for Earth's biological genome, and the only survivor of the group. They collected genetic samples of all living beings on Earth to reproduce in their new home. But now, the spaceship systems have malfunctioned. They have already lost 30% of the samples. If this continues to worsen, all the samples will die. That would be the greatest loss for humanity. That's why he decided to help the protagonist. Bauer was very confused after hearing this. He thought, having only slept for 8 years, how could the spaceship have changed so much? The girl said, he's been eating grasshoppers for over 8 years. It's said that this ship can sustain several generations. Meanwhile, over here, the lieutenant in the duty cabin suddenly heard a sound coming from the intake pipe. He thought a monster was coming in, but it turned out to be a young private named Gallo, calling for help. This person said he was a member of the command cabin, so the lieutenant quickly asked, what exactly happened on the ship? But Gallo also had insomnia after effects. He couldn't remember anything. The scene shifts back to Paul and the others. They quietly approached the crew's central sleeping area, but found that most of the sleeping pods were empty. Where did everyone go? They soon had their answer. Paul and the girl accidentally fell into a cesspit. Inside, there were actually hundreds of skeletons. It turned out those monsters used the crew's sleeping area as their free restaurant. Anyone who wakes up is immediately eaten. Getting through the monsters' restaurant wouldn't be easy. As soon as they climbed out of the cesspit, they were spotted by a monster. The three could only fight for their lives against it. After a tremendous struggle, they finally managed to kill the monster. But the sounds of fighting and the smell of blood attracted more monsters. These monsters didn't waste a single resource. They went crazy, fighting over the corpses of their fallen companions. Only then did they start chasing after them. But this also gave them time to escape. The three of them quickly fled. They hid inside a closed aquarium. Here, they unexpectedly encountered someone. It was a very timid old man. Seeing that they meant no harm, the old man kindly cooked food for them. He made a clear broth from the lubricant. You have to understand, given the current situation, food on the ship is extremely scarce. It's truly rare for the old man to be so generous. So the three of them took a short break. The girl speculated aloud that the monsters were likely not an alien species, but rather the original passengers of the spaceship. When they were in stasis, everyone was injected with a synthetic enzyme. This was to adapt to the environment of the future planet, but if they continued to use this enzyme after waking up, it would lead to genetic mutations. They had no food source, and had been preying on the awakened crew, so they ultimately became like this. After hearing this, the old man told them that the truth he knew was far more complex. Then he pointed to the murals here, revealed the origins of those terrifying monsters. It turns out that many years ago, the three crew members on the spaceship received a message from Earth. The message said that due to resource plundering, Earth had been destroyed. They were the last remaining humans. Upon hearing this terrible news, one of the crew members, in despair about the future, and suffering from insomnia, fell into a mental breakdown. He killed the other two companions. He didn't want to fall back into stasis. Having lost all legal and moral constraints, he crazily took on the role of God. He awakened a portion of the crew, and drove them into the cargo hold. He created a completely free realm, where they would kill each other for survival. When he got bored of it, he returned to the stasis chamber, and let those people outside fend for themselves. Later, that group of people, in their struggle for food, all turned into monsters. Just as the old man finished speaking, the three of them suddenly fell into a coma. It turns out this old man, the drugs were already mixed into the food. For survival, he has to keep hunting. Just as the three were tied up, at the critical moment of becoming a meal, Bauer told the old man, the spaceship's reactor is malfunctioning. It's happening more frequently. In less than an hour, it will self-destruct. And he is currently the only one still alive, technical engineer. If the reactor isn't restarted, everything will be completely doomed. They will die in an hour. At that point, eating or not makes no difference. After much consideration, the old man decided to let them go, to let him prove that what he said was true. Bauer quickly borrowed the old man's radio to contact the central guard. Sure enough, the central guard checked the database and found the power system can only last another 47 minutes at most. They don't have much time left. Now, let's talk about the lieutenant. Ever since this command pod, Gallo, appeared, he has been relentlessly questioning what happened to the spaceship. Gallo has been evasive. He only remembers receiving news that Earth had been destroyed. Both teammates suffered from insomnia after effects. They turned on each other. He couldn't remember anything else. Why is he the only one left alive? The lieutenant suspected that this Gallo killed his teammates, so he kept a tranquilizer gun ready at all times. Now, when Gallo heard that the spaceship would be destroyed in less than an hour, he seemed like a different person. He couldn't believe that Paul and the others could navigate through the monsters to restart the reactor. He suggested the lieutenant activate the escape pod to flee. There might still be a slim chance of survival, but the lieutenant replied, "What chance of survival is there in space? You just last a couple more days before starving to death." Of course, he disagreed. However, he didn't know that what Gallo had just said had already proven. He was the one the old man referred to, the one who thought he was a god, the mastermind behind the monsters. Suddenly, Gallo's expression hardened. He snatched the tranquilizer gun and took the lieutenant hostage. He demanded to be launched into space to escape. So the lieutenant had no choice but to comply. But during the launch, he pulled a fast one. He initiated a simulated launch. He locked the young man directly into the escape pod. The young man struggled for a long time, but ending up trapped in a pod was a tragedy. On the other side, under the guidance of the middle-aged man, the protagonist and his group quickly found a shortcut to the reactor. As they passed through the crew's family's sleeping quarters, Bauer's mind suddenly felt like a window had been opened. He regained some of his memories. He suddenly remembered. Lieutenant Peyton from his memories was not the middle-aged man leading them now. So who is this middle-aged man pretending to be the lieutenant? Who could he possibly be? But at that moment, he had no time to think further. They had to hurry on. When they finally reached the reactor room, they were horrified to discover that this was the monster's lair. The bottom level of the reactor was filled with sleeping monsters. The reactor was right in front of them, but it felt as distant as if it were a million miles away. Every step they took was filled with dread. After Bauer endured countless hardships, they finally reached the other side. As they prepared to restart the reactor, one of them made a critical mistake. The old man's bracelet accidentally fell below, waking the sleeping monsters. The monsters, seeing living beings, immediately surged toward the floor like a tidal wave. At this critical moment, the quiet guy stepped forward, attracted the wrath of most of the monsters, gained time for everyone. At the last moment, Paul finally succeeded in activating the reactor. A blast of energy shot out. It scorched 90% of the monster horde. Meanwhile, the spaceship returned to normal. Seeing this, everyone immediately turned back. But unfortunately, there were still too many monsters left. During the retreat, the suppressed guy bravely fell in battle. Meanwhile, the spaceship was back to normal. That Gallo actually took the opportunity to open the cryopod, immediately got into a scuffle with the armored guard. But the armored guard was too weak. Gallo snatched the tranquilizer gun away and jabbed it towards his arm. However, a strange thing happened. The two men's arms began to merge. Their tattoo marks were identical. In the blink of an eye, that Gallo suddenly vanished. In this duty pod, besides the fake guard, there was no one else. It turns out Gallo was the guard. The guard was Gallo. They are the aftermath of insomnia. Two distinct personalities have emerged. One is good, the other is evil. The good side wants to save the ship, while the evil side wants to play God. At this moment, it's clear that the evil personality has taken over. At this point, the truth is becoming very clear. This old guy killed his teammates when he was young. He forced thousands of passengers into the cargo hold to fend for themselves. He played a game of God with their lives. After he got bored with it, he returned to the cryo chamber. In fact, he's the madman who created the monsters. Just then, the old man was the first to escape here. As soon as he saw Gallo, he was instantly turned into a lunchbox. The male lead and the girl finally faced danger. They escaped back to the control room, but at this moment, it was completely empty inside. The two of them immediately rushed to the cockpit. They discovered two long-ride skeletons. The pilot was also here. Paul immediately aimed his gun at the pilot. He asked him who he really was. Gallo wanted to keep hiding the truth. He claimed he didn't remember much. He only remembered that it was him back received the news of Earth's destruction. Upon hearing this, Bauer immediately realized he was the crazy pilot the old man mentioned. That crazy pilot. So he revealed the whole truth, forcing him to confess. But Gallo refused to admit it. He believed he was the master and would be the ruler of the new planet in the future. He even tempted Bauer to join him to rule the new planet together. After saying this, he opened the cockpit skylight. To his surprise, there was no starry sky outside. It was pitch black. It turned out their spaceship had already crashed. They must currently be on Tanis. And it wasn't just 8 years that had passed. It was actually 923 years. At this point, we need to clarify the timeline. It takes 123 years to travel from Earth to Tanis, when Gallo created the free nation on the ship. It must have been over 80 years. Then he grew bored and returned to the sleep pod. The spaceship malfunctioned midway and crashed after 123 years. In between, they were asleep for over 800 years. Those monsters also endured over 800 years on the ship. So what that old man heard must be legends passed down through generations. Back to the story now. At this moment, they saw the underwater creatures swimming outside the window. There was no longer any doubt. Of course, our protagonist couldn't go crazy with this lunatic. The two of them went straight at it. The girl also joined the fight, but it was quite tragic. Neither of them was a match. As a result, the protagonist was left dazed. He accidentally fired his gun and shattered the skylight. The water pressure crushed the glass as it burst in. Seawater flooded into the spaceship. That wicked gyro immediately met his end. The protagonist snapped back to reality. He quickly grabbed the girl and dove into a cryopod. At the last moment, they rejected. Meanwhile, as the spaceship was submerged, the system automatically activated the emergency evacuation protocol. All remaining cryopods were launched as well. In the end, the male and female leads, along with the others, surfaced. They miraculously survived. This year was known as the Year of Tanis. The total population of the planet was 1,213. Over 60,000 had emigrated. Only 1,213 remain. You can imagine what must have happened over the past 800 years. Overall, the suspense in this movie is quite well done. It's different from other sci-fi films. There are no terrifying alien creatures, and there are no highly intelligent robots. What we have is humanity itself is the source of terror. It seems to be telling us that, without the constraints of morality and law, in the struggle for limited resources, humans could really descend into something monstrous. Alright, that's it for today. Thank you all for watching. Also, for those who have different opinions on the timing, feel free to leave comments and discuss. I'm the same guy. See you next time.